Yogaha. Verse number 8. Last time I explained about 7. In some sites, 7 and 8 verses are given together. So here I'll read out Prakrutim Swama Vastabhya Visujami Punah Punaha Bhuta Grama Mimam Kritsnam Avasham Prakurte Prakurte Vashata. So I'll read out again. Prakurtim Swama Vastabhya Visujami Punaha Punaha Puta Grama Mimam Kratsnum Avasham Prakurter Vashat. So he'll observe in him. So Sri Krishna described the working of Prakriti in this shloka. Last shloka we came to know what is when the world is created, kalpakshaya, kalpadau, when the world is world ends, how it ends. Here in this shloka, Shri Krishna described the working of Prakriti in this shloka. Prakriti is Ishvara's project. I just read out the word by word. Prakriti means nature, we said. Swam means my. Avastabhya means commanding. Visrujami means I project. Punah means repeatedly. Punah means repeatedly. Bhuta Grama means world of beings. Imam means this. Krishna means Krishna means the entire. Avasham means helplessly. Of Prakrti means of Prakrti. Vashat means controlled. Vashat means controlled by. So Prakrti Swama Vastabhya Visrujami Punah Putagrama Mimam Kritsnam Avasham Prakrter Vashat. So here we'll understand the how the Prakriti and world creation is done. The translation is keeping my own Prakriti under control, I project forth again and again the whole of this multitude of beings which are powerless owing to the influence of their own nature. So one more in other sentence, the whole cosmic order is under me. By my will it is manifested again and again, and by my will it is annihilated at the end. So he is the creator, he is the destroyer. Last shloka Kalpakshaya Kalpadau, when it ends, Brahma, when he completes 100 years, it will end. The earth year also mentioned, it was some number. When Brahma's lifespan ends, the world will be destroyed, and again new Brahma will be created, new world will be created. So the in the ISKCON books, Bhagavad Gita book, it is given there are 3 types of Vishnus they have given. Maha Vishnu, Maha Vishnu and Garbhodakshaya Vishnu and Kshirodakshaya Vishnu. So there are 3 Vishnu. So according to them, Maha Vishnu, who controls everything, he creates a number of worlds. Not only in the earth there is a world, but he creates many worlds. Mahavishnu creates many worlds. He who sits in the ocean, with his breath he creates many worlds. Skin pores, and with his breath he creates many worlds. That is called as Mahavishnu. He controls everything. And for each universe, again we have according to them, they have Lord, different Shiva, Brahma, Vishnu. So for the each world, he sends different Vishnu, that is Garbhodakshaya Vishnu. And again for each in each living being and each material also we can say that Kshiro Dakshaya Vishnu will be there. So according to them, in every Atma, Kshiro Dakshaya Vishnu will be there. So he controls everything, he manages everything. That's what they have explained. But in some other books, Shri Krishna describes the working of Prakruti. The Prakruti is the Ishvara projector. It projects the entire universe of the names, forms at the beginning of the cycle, withdraws them at the end of the cycle, only to start all over again. We saw this in previous shloka. Here we investigate the relationship between Ishvara and Prakruti. Yeah. So here in the ISKCON book they have given, in science we have read that world is evolved, we were monkeys and all those things, but they say that everything was created at the same time. All animals, all trees, everything was created. It is not evolved. Humans are born as human only. The apes and other species also created this at the same time. They say that it is not evolved. So we'll look into the relationship between the Ishvara and Prakruti. Shri Krishna say that Ishvara is fully controls the Prakruti. He controls. He is the commander of Prakruti. Prakruti cannot do anything without the command of Ishvara. However, the Ishvara is not a micromanager, so he won't do micromanagement. He does not tell how to do its job. He is just set the rules. He has just set the rules in motion. Prakriti is a system that follows the rules, just like the computer program. So, or the auto pilot in aircraft. So he won't do micromanagement. He has just set the rule. According to that, it works. How does this work? So we know that Prakriti, which is we sometimes call as Maya, comprises of three gunas, resulted based on its inherent property. For example, the Rajas, Tamas, and Satvik. So he says he has set some rules depending on our karmas. Previous life, if we have done karma, the next birth will be according to that. So he has set a role. He won't do any. He won't interfere. According to our karma, only we get the next birth. So he won't do any micromanagement. We see indirectly whatever we do, we have to. If we have some wish, example, if we have some desperately want some wish, want something in this life, but if it is not fulfilled, we'll take birth again, and in the next birth it will be fulfilled. Everything he has set a rule. According to that, it works. It all depends on us only. He is saying. So that is the relation between the Prakriti and the Ishvara and us. So next, let us look at the nature of Prakriti and the individual. Shri Krishna says that individual is under the complete control of Prakriti. He helplessly goes through infinite cycles of birth and death due to the influence of Prakriti. So in our own lives, we know so many people that are hale and they will be healthy one moment and are killed by an accident next moment. So the life and death he controls. We will not have any clue what happens next moment. They say no. Yeah, they have no say in the matter whatsoever. The only way we can get out of Prakriti influence is to put forth the effort towards achieving the liberation. So we have to do good karma. We'll not have control of birth and death. Here, everything works according to his rules. So we know that Ishvara commands Prakriti to perform the creation, sustenance, and dissolutions. So we have seen that the actions have a tendency to bind us, to make us to get attached to them. Does Ishvara get attached to the actions of creation, sustenance, dissolution? Which that we'll see in the next shloka. So yeah, some more things like. Yeah, the question may be raised, how is it possible that the Supreme Lord, who is unattached to the creation and not modifiable in any actual manifest creation? So this is being answered in this shloka. Yeah. So we have for everything we have to work for the moksha or the liberation. Everything we have to work. If we work, he'll give the moksha. Otherwise, if we do bad karmas, we have to suffer. So that is how the relationship between Ishvara and Prakriti. Yeah, one more, I will repeat again that animals, beasts, birds, everything is simultaneously created. It is not evolved, they say in the ISKCON book. Here, the living entities have nothing to do with this process. We are not connected with process of creation, but our next birth depends on our karmas. We are not dependent on the process of creation, but our life, next birth will depend on our karmas. Supreme, yeah. After creating different species of life, he has no connection. He has no connection with them. The creation takes place to accommodate their inclination of the various living entities, and so Lord does not become involved with it. So here he is saying that as far as the yeah, everything works according to the rule. He creates kalpaksha kalpa, according to that rule he creates and destroys the world. Any question? I hope I am clear.
Sairam Sharda,
Sairam uncle.
can we reserve the discussion at the end of Sai Swarup's presentation, or
Uh,
because two are so close to one another, Gita Vahini and this one. Is it
yeah,
okay? Is it okay?
yes, fine, uncle. Sai Swarp, you can also comment if you want it to be held at the end or
See,
now.
that way we can contain all the questions and answers just after the presentation. So the presentation come through, and it would facilitate the listeners also. Don't you think so?
Sure, sure, uncle. I think I'll start with the presentation. So I'll just take over, Sairam. So Sairam, we are looking at the end part of chapter 15 today, where Swami talks about the purpose of the Bhagavad Gita and the practice of chanting Om, and even at the last moment of our life. So in last week we looked at demigods and the Yajna Purusha, the concept of the god of sacrifice. Then we went into material creation. Then we were talking about action. So that was the first half of chapter 15. So now we are going into the second half. So Swami says, like the current, Godhead operates through all instruments and awards the consequences of all the activities of the instruments. He is the bestower of the fruits of action. Like the current, he is the inner motivator of all beings. Since he is the activator of all actions, he is called the Lord of the sacrifice, Adi Yajna. The seventh entity is Om or Pranava, which, when pronounced at the moment of death, awards merger with the imperishable highest Atma itself. When Krishna said this, Arjuna immediately prayed to him to elaborate the point a little more so that he might grasp it clearly. Krishna was only glad to do so. The moment of death does not mean some future point of time. It means this very moment. The moment might turn out to be the moment of any moment might turn out to be the moment of death. So every moment is the last. Every moment must be filled with Om. Then the fate of a person after death is molded by the thought that predominates at the moment of death. That thought is the foundation on which the next birth is built. Whoever at that time remembers me attains my glory, reaches me in fact. So every action, every striving of his remembers me. Every striving of his, every spiritual exercise should be aimed at sanctifying that fateful moment. The years of life must be devoted to the discipline that will bring up at that moment the thought of the highest Atma or Om. So here when Swami says that the seventh aspect that Swami is going to discuss about is Pranava or Om, which should be pronounced at the moment of death. So Arjuna immediately puts forth the question, what do you mean by Om should be taught at, it should be said only at the moment of death or something like that? Please explain to me more clearly. So to which Krishna replies that the moment of death should be considered as every moment in life. So it should not be looked at as a future like tomorrow will be our death or something like that. He says that this moment we might pass away. So every moment should be the last. So every moment should be filled with Om. Then Swami says that whatever that happens after death is actually decided by what happens during the moment of death and before the moments of death. So Swami says, if someone thinks about the glory of the Lord, then he can reach the Lord. Just like how in many Chinnakatha Swami has narrated, a man tries to have all his sons named as after the Lord's name so that he can call them out at the moment of death, and at exactly the last moment when the son named Narayana comes in, Swami puts forth in a funny way saying that, hey, have you left the shop open, something like that, so that he passes away after that and he does not he is not able to fulfill his wish of reaching the Lord by naming his sons. So similarly, Swami says that we should strive to remember the Lord, and we should practice every kind of spiritual discipline so that our last moment will be pure and it can be very blessed and blissful. And Swami says that just how we aim for the last moment, every moment in our life should be aimed at that very last moment, so that we will be able to think of the Lord at the last moment. What has to be discarded is the body, this physical case. What has to be earned is the universe, the undiscardable, indestructible, undying truth, Satya, and eternity, Nityam. That reality is the entity called Atma, or what is the same thing, the highest Atma. Since you are that, you cannot cast it off. Casting off the body is akin to shifting from a house occupied for some years, and birth is your entry into a new house. These are both physical acts which do not affect the Atma. So here Swami says that the body is just like a case, and it has to be discarded, and The Parabrahman has to be earned, and it's just like moving from an old house into a new one. So Swami says dying or casting of the body is like moving out of a house, and taking birth is moving into a new one. So since these are physical acts, these do not directly affect the Atma. Arjuna, the Atma doesn't come in or go out. Those who toil in the falsehood of body consciousness or Deha Tattva cannot have the Atma revealed to them. Body consciousness is liable to decay and death. Therefore, more than the 6 items mentioned by me already, Om, which is a potent instrument of liberation, has to be understood clearly. All the long years of life are to be utilized for this consummation. The mind being fixed on Om when the body is being cast off. You belch the flavor of the food you ate. That your last thought indicates the food you have fed on. Your progress is in accordance with your spiritual practices. Be always aware of the need to fix the mind on holy thoughts when the body is got rid of. That is to say, immerse yourself in the holy thoughts every moment of your life. So here Swami says that the Atma is not something that comes into a body or goes out of the body. So people who are actually attached to the body feel that way, but that is not the truth. And Swami says the body is liable to decay and death. So eventually that has to happen. That is something that is the reality. Therefore, this Om is most important than the other 6 things that Swami had mentioned. So all again he repeats the same point. He says that every year of life, all the years of life, all seconds in life has to be utilized for this very moment, and that is the last moment, and the mind being fixed on the Lord. So Swami says whatever we eat, the food, that is the smell that comes from us. So similarly, whatever the thought that we think at the last moment is the same thing that comes out of us. So Swami says the progress is the progress towards this concept is in accordance with the spiritual practices that we take. And Swami says we should always be aware to fix the mind on holy thoughts, and that is the way to immerse ourselves in holy thoughts in every moment of our life. Then Arjuna asks, "Oh Lord, has one have to strive for it from now on if one wishes to get holy thoughts at the last moment of life? Can we not get them at that time itself?" So here Arjuna asks one doubt that we all might have, that like why can't we just skip to the last moment, and why can't we just have our life now and then we can skip to the last moment for the contemplation on the Lord? So the Lord realized his doubt and replied, "Your intelligence seems to have blunted a great deal. You hesitate to accept the need to develop holy thoughts from now on. Arjuna, the mind has to be educated into the habit through what is called the discipline of constant practice. The mind has to be trained to avoid thoughts and concentrate only on the Lord. Only then you can reach the oversoul or the supreme spirit. Unless you systematically teach it and train it, it will not and cannot remember the supreme spirit in the moment of death." So here Swami says that you are becoming more and more blunted in your intelligence, and you need to develop holy thoughts from now on only, because at the last moment it cannot come, and the mind will not sit on holy thoughts at the last moment. So it has to be trained systematically, and it has to be through constant practice. So only then we can reach the supreme soul or the Paramatma. Then Swami again reiterates that we cannot without training it cannot be done. So Swami says, "You might ask me why. Well, think of your own case. You are able to use these weapons of offense and defense in the battle that is imminent because you taught yourself the art of handling them many years ago, right? Could you have used them with confidence without preparation on the spur of the moment? Is it ever possible? The warrior will be called upon to wield weapons someday, so he is taught the art from childhood so that he may be ready for any emergency." So here Swami gives the example of the bow that Arjuna uses. He says that you cannot directly place an arrow and shoot the target just when you need. So similar to that, you need several years of practice. So the same way you need, without preparation, this cannot be done. So whatever else a person may not meet during life, he is certain to meet with death. So each must be trained to have at that time the attitude and thought that are most beneficial to them. Otherwise, life is a failure, a waste. A person unready for this consummation has to suffer the fate that would befall him. No one enters a battlefield in order to suffer defeat. So here Swami says again that whatever that we don't face in life, we'll face in death. So we have to be prepared for that. We have to be prepared for anything that we might be able to face. So the only way to do that is by constant practice right from childhood. So Swami also says that so if such a thing happens during death, you will definitely be defeated. And for even during preparation of war, no one just goes in order to get with the intention to get defeated. So we prepare to actually win the war, right? Similarly, we have to do the same thing for our own death also. So Swami says, so too, no one voluntarily accepts a fall. People only seek progress. Would it not be wise, therefore, to strive for the end that is your own best interest? Hence, everyone must take earnest steps to secure the thought of the seventh item, Om, Pranava, at the last moment of life. Whoever dies in the thought attains me, said Krishna. This is the entire essence of the Gita. For the goal of all actions is to attain attain the acme of progress, isn't it? That is the urge that makes people engage in prayers, in repetition of the name and in meditation, in ritual worship and in spiritual exercises. All those who have placed faith in these have to remember the goal throughout. So here Swami says again, no one seeks defeat on their own, like no one wantedly goes to seek defeat. So Swami says, if you are looking for your own best interest, then you have to strive for the end that you must attain. So Swami says, you have to take all the steps that you need to actually think of the pranava, the Om in the last moment of your life. So we also have to do that in order to reach the Lord. So Swami says this is the essence of the entire teaching that he is imparting in the middle of the battlefield. He says that this is the essence of the Gita, and this is what actually makes people to engage in prayers and in contemplation of the Lord and in meditation and in this ritual worship and spiritual practices. So everyone who is a believer has to think of the goal throughout the process. Krishna said that Om has to be remembered at the moment of death. Certain points require elucidation in connection to this, for there are many who argue that Om can be repeated only by a few and that others are not entitled to it. This is wrong. This false conclusion has been arrived at because they do not know the truth. It springs from a mistaken belief. So here Swami says that there are people who believe that even the pranava should not be repeated by everyone, and only a certain group of people or a certain number of people are allowed to do that, and others are not entitled to it. Swami says that this is wrong, and everyone should actually practice pranava for the last moment at death. And Swami says this kind of a belief comes from a mistaken idea. Then the Gita does not mention this group or that group. Krishna declares whoever, without any qualifying words or limiting it to one class or sex. He does not even say who deserves or who does not deserve, who is authorized or who is unauthorized. He says only that for meditation on Om, mere calling it to memory is of no use. Some preliminary disciplines have to be gone through, like control of the senses and concentration of the mind. For when the mind is flitting from one fancy to another, how can the production of Om only by the vocal organs be of any benefit? The sound will not help the attainment of liberation. Senses have to be curbed, thoughts have to be one-pointed, and the glory has to be apprehended. That is why the Lord advised that from birth to death you must be engaged in the search for truth. Instead, if you postpone spiritual discipline and until the death, you must be engaged, until last moment, you will be like the student who turns the pages of textbook for the first time just before entering the examination hall. If the student feels that he has before him one full year and neglects to learn from the teacher, lecture notes and books, how can anything enter the brain that very morning it will only add to the student's despair. The student can be pronounced proficient only in indolence. So here Swami says that again, the Gita does not ever give any kind of like words like who is allowed and who is not allowed, and who actually can chant Om or who cannot, and all those kinds of things are not mentioned in Gita. Swami only gives the only one stipulation that Swami mentions is spiritual practices and discipline. And if that constant practice and the constant yearning is not there, then it is better to avoid the practice of Om, because the mere chanting of Om through the vocal cords has no meanings. So Swami says it is like he gives the example of a person who attends an exam without any preparation and without any kind of like he just skips through the pages at the last moment while entering the examination hall. So Swami says without adequate preparation, nothing can be achieved, and that kind of practice is not of any use. No tree will yield fruit the moment you plant the seedling in your backyard. For the tree to reach that stage, you have to foster it with care over a period of time, don't you? Similarly, whatever result you seek, you have to follow carefully the preparatory disciplines and without break. No one can acquire the fruit without vigilance and steadfastness. Spiritual aspirants must always be aware of this. The yearning must be directed away from how to be born and towards how to die. For birth depends on how death takes place. Death comes first, birth happens later. Folk believe that people are born to die and they will die so that they may be born. It is wrong. You are born so that you may not be born again. You die so that you may not die again. That is to say, the one who dies must die one who dies must so die that rebirth does not happen. When once you die, you should not be born again to meet another death. Death is inevitable. So if you are born, avoid death and avoid birth so that you may avoid death. So here Swami says that people, spiritual aspirants must be aware of the concept that we have to be vigilant, and we have to actually try to move on from how to be born than how to die. And Swami says the purpose of taking birth is to not be born again, and the purpose of death is not to go into a situation where we don't die again. So in short, if we die, then we should not take birth again so that we may not face the situation of dying again. That is, the very purpose of our life is to not take another life. And then Swami says the spiritual aspirant must not aspire for a good birth but for a good death. You may be born well in a good family or with many favorable circumstances, but the subsequent action may not ensure a good death. If a good death is aimed at, the trouble of being born and becoming once again subject to death can be avoided. Everyone born must have the end always in view. Cultivate good habits of thought and action in order to make the end genuinely auspicious. Attaining such an end is the unmistakable sign of winning God's grace. So here Swami says, like in conclusion, that an aspirant must not aspire for a good birth again, but rather he should ask for a good death. And Swami says, if you are born well in a good family and many favorable circumstances, or if our actions are not good, then the death may not be good. And if you really want a good death, then the trouble of being born should be avoided, and the trouble of being subject again to death should be avoided. And Swami says everyone who has taken a birth should always think of the end, and we have to cultivate good thoughts and good habits so that the end will actually be auspicious, and that is actually the way to win God's grace, and that this is what the essence of the Gita says. And I think with this, the second half of chapter 15, chapter 15 is completely done, Sairam. We can have a discussion, otherwise we can conclude for the session, Sairam.
Sai Ram,
Sairam, uncle.
I guess somebody else is also interested in asking questions,
Sure, sure, uncle.
so I can wait. Sai Ram, I don't see anyone coming up. So I do notice that both of you, Sharda, Hari, and yourself, have done an amazing job of presenting what Sri Krishna has to. I don't know why there is an echo. Do you know?
Oh, Sairam, Sairam, uncle.
I don't know why there is an echo. Oh, now there is no echo. Thank you, Sai Swarup. So there is, I find I am taking up the challenge of bridging that chapter 9, verse 8, presented by Sharda, and the Gita Vahini, chapter 15, the second part of it by you. All I can say is that both Sri Krishna and Sai Krishna are sharing that information that by my grace, you, as a human being, he says, human being, the first part is the be, and you be reflecting myself, my supreme consciousness of Atma in such a manner that you are continuing as a being. That's the understanding of ing, and then you become me, namely the supreme consciousness, and that is the practice that he is recommending in both of the chapter 9 as well as Rajavidya Rajaguhyam, as well as in this Gita Vahini presented by Sai Swarup, so that when you die, or when you leave, when I leave, let me you take it on myself. When I leave this body, then whenever the Atma, supreme consciousness, leaves the body, which we understand as the understanding of death, that is the separation of the soul from the body, then at that time, my mind, intellect, and the other instruments that we talked about, mind, intellect, Sat, Chit, is through Sat, it is established in the identity of the Supreme Consciousness, therefore, which has no death. So you die a death that there is no, I meant no birth. The Supreme I consciousness has no rebirth. And that's how we find Swami operating even in Prashanti Nilayam. Even after his letting go of the body, which we refer to as Maha Samadhi. So after that also, the Prashanti Nilayam is still running and functioning with the grace of his supreme consciousness. I hope I am able to convince and give the confidence and clarity of understanding of what Swami is, as both of you have shared by your presentations on chapter 9 and chapter 15 in Gita Vahini. I will repeat it very clearly once more. he has that purport, or he is communicating, and this is the essence that I get from the both of the presentations, is that by my grace, that is the grace of the Supreme Consciousness, you have the opportunity to be born as a human being, and his emphasis is on being. The human, we understand, he has given us the gift of mano, buddhi, ahankara, and chitta. So, and I have talked about the glory of all these four entities last time also. So, he says, with these four instruments, you can dwell in your practice, namely sadhana, and train these instruments so that they are always immersed, as Sai Swarup said, in the Supreme Consciousness. It put it in Swami's words, in the ocean of my Supreme Consciousness. So that every moment you will be empowered with the Supreme Consciousness, though you will live in the world and perform whatever functions you had to because of the rebirth that I granted you by my grace. But if you train your entities' equipment, namely mind, intellect, that is buddhi, and chit, the knowledge part of it, so that from a supreme consciousness of love, you will start loving me. And in that loving consciousness of the Supreme, you will not get distracted by the multiplicities and diversities of the world in which you have to fulfill the leftover karmas from your previous birth, which is why you took the second birth or the rebirth. Now he says, you live a life in such a manner that you die really well. That is, the mind and all these instruments, they're all immersed in the Supreme Consciousness, which has no rebirth, which is what is the proof that we have with Swami's Mahasamadhi. After that, he has not come back to convince us that he has transcended that necessity for rebirth. Whatever reason for which he took the birth, he has fulfilled it already while he existed in Prashanti Nilayam until 2010, etc. And it has come to a glorious end, fulfillment. Therefore, he has lived a birth which had to experience the death, because every birth goes through a death. But then he says, you die a death which has no more remnants of unfulfilled karmas or actions or desires, etc., such that it has to be reborn to fulfill those karmas in the next birth. I hope I have made that enlightenment reasonably clear. It's all by the grace of Bhagavan, Sri Krishna as well as Sai Krishna. That is how I bridge both the offerings tonight from Sharda and Sai Swarup. Thank you both. Jai Sai Ram.
Thank you, Uncle Sairam.